slap me?
Shut up. Shut up and listen.
Kennedy slapped her. The sound cracked through the restaurant like something splitting open. Chioma's head turned with the force of it. Her hand flew to her face. The room went absolutely still. She turned back to face him slowly. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set, and she did not cry. She pressed her fingers against her cheek and looked at the man she had spent 2 years building her life around in this city. Kennedy looked at his own hand and said nothing. Sioyan picked up her champagne glass and took a small, unhurried sip. 3 phones were already recording. The restaurant staff had frozen near the back wall. The piano music from the corner felt very far away. Kennedy's jaw tightened. He raised his hand again. A hand closed around his wrist. The grip came from behind. One hand, precise and absolute, locking Kennedy's arm mid-motion, as if it had run into a wall. Kennedy turned. The man standing behind him was not what anyone in that room would have predicted. He was not large. He was not loud. He was dressed in dark trousers and a charcoal shirt with the sleeves pushed to the elbow, and he held Kennedy's wrist with one hand and looked at him with a gaze so flat and so direct and so completely without emotion that Kennedy's mouth opened and produced nothing at all. "Raise your hand at her again," the man said, "and watch them break." He released Kennedy's wrist. Kennedy stepped back. His body made that decision before his pride could object. The man turned. He looked at Chioma, at her cheek, red and beginning to swell, at her hand still pressed against it, at the tears she was holding back through what was clearly an enormous act of will, at the way she was standing, straight-spined, chin up, burning from the inside out and refusing, absolutely refusing, to give this room the collapse it was waiting for. He looked at her the way no one else in that restaurant had looked at her all evening, like she was the only person in the room worth seeing. His name was Han Jisu. He owned the restaurant they were standing in. He had been at his corner table all evening with a glass of water and a document he had not read a single word of, because something at table 7 had pulled his attention from the moment this woman walked in, and he had watched the entire evening unfold. The shoulder press at the entrance, Kennedy's silence through every course, this woman holding herself together with a grace the room did not deserve. When Kennedy raised his hand a second time, Jisu was already on his feet. "Do you want to stay here?" he asked her. His Korean was quiet and unhurried. The voice of a man who has never needed volume to be heard. Chioma looked at him, at this stranger who had crossed the floor, stopped a raised hand with one grip, and was now standing in front of her asking a question that contained more genuine concern than anything Kennedy had offered her all evening. She looked at Kennedy's hand, at Sioyan, who was watching Jisu with an expression that had gone from satisfaction to something quieter and more careful, at the phone still recording, at the room that had watched everything and done nothing until this man stood up. "No," she said. Jisu nodded once. He turned toward the exit and left space behind him, and she understood without being told that the space was hers if she chose it. She picked up her clutch from the table. She did not look at Kennedy. She did not look at Sioyan. She walked. "Chioma." Kennedy's voice rose behind her. "Chioma, I am talking to you." She kept walking. Sioyan sat in her chair. She watched the door close. "Before we continue with the story, I'd like to welcome you to my channel, Afro-Korean Mafia series by Jasmine. To everyone returning, welcome back, and to our new viewers, I'm glad you're here. Kindly like, subscribe, and join our growing community. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, because this story is only just getting started." Outside, the Seoul night was cold and bright and entirely indifferent. A black car sat at the curb with the engine running and the rear door already open. The driver stood beside it with his eyes forward and his hands at his sides. Jisu stopped on the pavement and looked at the street. Not at her. At the street. Chioma stood a few feet away and looked at him. At the line of his jaw. At his hands loose at his sides, relaxed, as if nothing about the last 10 minutes had cost him anything. There was no performance in his posture. No angling toward her. No waiting for acknowledgement. He was not waiting for anything at all. "The driver will take you wherever you need to go," he said, still looking at the street. "Thank you," she said. He glanced at her once, brief and direct, then back to the street. "You're not coming?" she asked. "No," he said. She got in the car. The door closed. She sat in the cool leather dark and looked through the window as the car pulled into Cheongdam traffic, and she watched Han Jisu standing on that pavement in his charcoal shirt with his hands in his pockets, and his face turned toward the street until the car turned the corner and the city closed around him. She pressed both hands flat against her thighs. She made it all the way to her apartment in Itaewon, through the lobby, into the lift, down the hallway, through her own front door. She locked it behind her, put her back against it, and slid down until she was sitting on the floor with her knees pulled to her chest and the silence of the apartment pressing in from all sides. And then she cried. Not the restrained, careful tears she had refused to give Kennedy and Seoyin and that restaurant full of recording phones. She cried the way you cry when you have been holding something for so long that your arms have gone numb and you finally put it down. She cried for the slap, and she cried for the 2 years, and she cried for the version of Kennedy she had loved who had not, she now understood with complete clarity, ever fully existed outside her own willingness to believe in him. She cried until there was nothing left. Then she got up. She washed her face. She stood at the bathroom mirror and looked at herself, red-rimmed eyes, swollen cheek, smudged liner, and she said out loud to her own reflection, "You are done." She changed her clothes. She made tea. She sat at her kitchen counter and let herself think about the man on the pavement. The quiet of him. The way he had held Kennedy's wrist as if he was restraining himself from something much larger and had chosen, deliberately, to use the minimum. The 4 words he had spoken barely above a whisper that had turned Kennedy Balogun, with all his money and all his confidence and all his carefully cultivated influence in this city, into a man who stepped backward without deciding to. Raise your hand at her again and watch them break. She thought about those words for a very long time. Kennedy called 7 times before midnight. She watched the phone light up and go dark, and declined every call without speaking. On the 8th call, just before 1 in the morning, she picked up. "Chioma." "No," she said. A silence. "I need you to hear me," he said. "I heard you all evening," she said. "I heard you say nothing when she pushed me at the entrance. I heard you tell me to lower my voice. I heard your hand." She paused. "I have heard enough, Kennedy. I was not myself. You were exactly yourself," she said. "That is what I finally understand." She ended the call and put the phone face down on the counter and went to bed and lay in the dark and thought about nothing useful until her body made the decision for her and she slept. The next morning, Kennedy was outside her building. Tailored suit. Paper bag from the bakery around the corner that she had mentioned once, months ago, in passing. The full performance of a man who had gone home, slept, and spent the early hours calculating his approach. She walked outside and stopped. She looked at him, and something in her face made him stop moving before she said a word. It was not anger. Anger was negotiable. He had navigated her anger before. What was in her face was quieter than anger and much more final. "We're done," she said. "You're not being Kennedy." Her voice was even and clear. "You hit me in public. In front of cameras. You raised your hand a second time. There is no version of this conversation that continues us." He breathed in slowly. The apologetic surface thinned, and something harder came up from underneath. The part of him that was not accustomed to a door that would not open. "Who was he?" Kennedy said. "A stranger," she said. "He was not a stranger to that restaurant," Kennedy said. His voice had dropped to something careful and deliberate. The entire staff moved for him the moment he stood up. A stranger does not make a room move like that. His jaw tightened. "I want to know who he is." "That is not information you are entitled to," she said. "Chioma." "Go home, Kennedy." She walked back inside. The doorman held the door open and looked at the middle distance and did not look at Kennedy once, and that small, precise courtesy was the first mercy of her morning. At work, Minji put a phone on Chioma's desk without a word. The video had 12 different uploads across 4 platforms by 10 in the morning. The clearest one, filmed from 2 tables away with excellent audio, had 4.7 million views. The comments ran in Korean, English, Yoruba, French, and 6 other languages. The moment where Jesu's hand closed around Kennedy's wrist had been clipped separately and had its own circulation. The 4 words, translated into 11 languages overnight, were trending on 3 platforms. Chioma watched the clip once. She watched herself walk across that restaurant with her clutch in her hand and her chin up and her back straight, and she thought, "I did not know I looked like that." She had felt like she was barely holding together. On the screen, she looked like a woman walking out of a burning building with her composure completely intact. She watched the man in the charcoal shirt hold Kennedy's wrist. She watched his face when he turned to her. She paused the video on that frame and sat with it. "Do you know who he is?" Minji asked. She was trying very hard to sound casual and not succeeding. "He didn't tell me," Chioma said. Minji sat across from her, folded her hands on the desk, and chose her words with the expression of someone preparing to deliver significant information. "Han Jae-soo," she said. "He owns that restaurant. He owns the building your office is in. He owns 6 other properties between Cheongdam and Gangnam. His father controls the largest private logistics network in the southern half of this country and 3 infrastructure contracts that every major construction firm in Seoul needs access to. She paused. And the things people say about the Han family. I do not repeat rumors, but those things explain why every person in that room moved before he was even halfway across the floor. Chioma looked at the paused frame on the phone screen. At the man looking at her with those flat, direct eyes. He owns the restaurant, she said. He owns the restaurant, Minji confirmed. And he crossed the floor himself, Chioma said. Minji looked at her steadily. Han Jae-soo does not cross floors. Han Jae-soo sends people. Han Jae-soo makes calls. He does not stand up from his own table during dinner service and walk across the room. She paused. Except that last night he did. Chioma looked at the screen for a long time. She closed the video. She picked up her pencil and went back to work and spent the rest of the day being not entirely successful at thinking about anything else. Across the city, on the 41st floor of a Cheongdam tower, Han Jae-soo sat behind his desk and read through the morning reports. His assistant Park Hain placed a single printed sheet on top of the stack without comment. A screenshot from the video. His own face in profile, on the pavement outside Orchid. He looked at it for 4 seconds. He placed it face down to the side of the stack and continued reading. By 9 o'clock, the building manager for the Gangnam Tower, where Kennedy's company leased their floor, had received a call from Jae-soo's property management office. Polite. Procedural. A lease clause, subletting desk space to non-approved third parties, technically active for 6 months. A formal breach notice going out within the week. By 2 in the afternoon, the manager of the Cheongdam Club where Kennedy hosted his most important business dinners had reviewed the membership register and found, to his deep professional regret, that Mr. Balogun's standing reservation had been moved to the wait list pending a routine review, effective immediately. By 4, 2 of Kennedy's most reliable Korean business partners had each received a separate social call from people they respected. Nothing formal, just checking in. Some concerns have been raised about a particular relationship, worth reviewing before the end of the quarter. None of this carried Jae-soo's name. None of it could be pointed at him. It was the precise and quiet withdrawal of the city's goodwill. The coordinated cooling of the air around one man's professional life, executed the way a master removes warmth from a room. Not all at once, but steadily, thoroughly, and without leaving a visible mark. Kennedy Balogun sat in his office in the late afternoon and felt it. He felt it in the email from his most important partner that was 3 days late and oddly brief. He felt it in the missed call from his club and the polite, immovable response when he called back. He felt it in the conversation with his building manager that ended with the words formal breach notice and a 14-day response window. He sat very still at his desk. He reached for his phone and made a call and spent 40 minutes trying to understand exactly who Han Jae-soo was. And at the end of those 40 minutes, he sat at his desk in the gray October afternoon and understood, with the sick certainty of a man who has made an irreversible miscalculation, exactly what had begun to happen to his life. 11 days later, on a Saturday morning, Chioma sat in her regular coffee shop in Itaewon with her sketchbook open and a flat white in front of her, working on a personal project she kept only for weekends. Product concepts nobody had asked for, buildings she would never build, characters she invented for no one. The chair across from her was pulled out. She looked up. Han Jae-soo stood there in a dark pullover and simple trousers, his hair slightly unsettled from the October wind outside, holding a coffee cup and looking at her with that same flat, direct gaze. For a moment neither of them spoke. The only open seat, he said. She looked around the coffee shop. Every table full, every chair occupied, the Saturday morning crowd doing what it always did. Sit down, she said. He sat. He wrapped both hands around his cup and looked at the table for a brief moment before looking at her. I owe you a proper thank you, she said. I said it that night, but I was not in a state to say anything properly. She held his gaze. What you did, walking across that room, stopping his hand, nobody else in that restaurant moved. You didn't have to. I had to, he said. Simply. As if the alternative had never existed as a real option. She looked at him. You had to, she repeated. Yes, he said. She wanted to ask him why. But there was something in the directness of that single word that made the question unnecessary. Chioma looked at him for a moment. Something moved in her chest, small and cautious, and she put her hand over it metaphorically and held it still. She looked back at her sketchbook. They sat together in a quiet that was surprisingly comfortable. The hiss of the coffee machine, a burst of laughter from a nearby table, the low music the owner always played on Saturday mornings moving between them without demanding anything. 20 minutes later, he stood to leave. I come here most Saturdays, he said. She looked up at him. The morning light came through the window and caught the side of his face. She noticed a small scar at the corner of his left jaw, faint, old, barely visible, and found herself wondering about it, and then felt faintly irritated that she was wondering about it. "I'm usually here on Saturdays too," she said. He nodded once and left. She looked at the door after he had walked through it, and then looked down at her sketchbook and found she had been pressing her pencil against the same spot on the page for the last 5 minutes, making a small dark circle she had not intended. She turned the page and started fresh. He was there the following Saturday. Same chair. Same coffee. The first 15 minutes passed in the same comfortable quiet as the week before. "What do you actually do?" she asked eventually. "Not the family name. You personally." He considered this. "I manage assets," he said. "Properties, logistics contracts, investment portfolios. I attend meetings. I make decisions that other people bring to me." He paused. "It is less interesting than it sounds." "That doesn't sound interesting at all," she said. Something happened at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. The suggestion of one. The slight shift of muscles that in another person would have preceded a smile, but in him stopped just before arrival, like a door that opened an inch and then held. She noticed it immediately. She filed it away and said nothing. "What does interesting look like to you?" she asked. He thought about it genuinely. "Busan," he said. "The port in the early morning before the market opens. The light on the water." He looked at his cup. "I don't go back much anymore." "Why not?" "Because home is complicated when the person you went home to is gone," he said. She did not push. She recognized a sealed door when she saw one, and she respected sealed doors because she had several of her own. "Lagos in the rainy season," she offered instead. "The smell of the air just before it rains. The way everything turns green overnight." She smiled at the table. "I miss it constantly." He looked at her when she smiled. She did not know this because she was looking at the table. The corner of his mouth moved again, slightly further this time. "Tell me about it," he said. She talked about Lagos the way people talk about a first love. Warmth and exasperation, and a homesickness she had learned to carry like a smooth stone in her pocket, always there, usually bearable. She talked for 20 minutes without noticing. When she stopped, she looked at him and found him watching her with an expression she had no clean name for. Attentive and still, like a person listening to music they did not expect to affect them. "Sorry," she said. "I talk too much when I—" "You don't," he said. She stopped. "You talk the right amount," he said. "I don't talk enough. It evens out." She looked at him. He was looking at his coffee again, the tips of his ears very slightly pink, which was the most human thing she had seen from him, and which she filed away with great care and said absolutely nothing about. "Same time next Saturday?" she said. He looked up. "Yes," he said. Kennedy appeared at her office building in early November. Dark jacket, tired eyes, the particular tiredness of a man whose infrastructure is quietly collapsing and who has not slept well in several weeks. "My lease," he said without greeting. "3 of my Korean partners have gone cold. My club membership is under review. I received a breach notice for my office building." He looked at her steadily. "All of it started 11 days after that restaurant." Chioma said nothing. "Is it him?" Kennedy said. "Hanjiso." She looked at him without speaking. "Chioma." His voice dropped to something careful and low. "Do you understand who that man is? What his family is? The things that happen to people who end up on the wrong side of." "You slapped me," she said. He stopped. "In public," she said. "In front of cameras. In a room full of people." She held his gaze. "Whatever is happening to your business, Kennedy, start the accounting there. Not with me." She walked back into the building. Behind her, he said, "I still love you." She stopped walking. She stood on the pavement for a moment with her back to him and the cold November air on her face. "I know you believe that," she said, without turning around. "That's the saddest part of all of this." She went inside. She told Jisoo about the encounter the following Saturday. She left out the last part, the "I still love you," because she did not know what to do with it and was trying not to think about it. Jisoo listened with his hands around his cup. "He's not wrong about the source," he said when she finished. "You should have told me," she said. "Yes," he said. "Clean. Direct. No defense mounted, no explanation offered. Don't do things that involve my life without telling me first," she said. "I understand," he said. "I won't." She believed him. Not from naivety. She was 28 years old and had learned to calibrate people carefully. She believed him because in every exchange they had shared across these weeks, he had not once said something he did not mean. "He's scared," she said. "He should be careful," Jisoo said. She looked at him, at the steady, quiet certainty of him. and felt the thing she had been managing in her chest for weeks press a little harder against its containment. She looked back at her sketchbook. "Tell me about Busan," she said. He looked at her for a moment. And then slowly he began to talk. 2 days later, she went to a work event at a rooftop venue in Gangnam. Technically optional. Practically mandatory. She arrived in a black dress and her good earrings, and she was fine. Genuinely fine, in the way she had been increasingly fine since she had stopped spending her energy managing Kennedy. A client named Kwon Dae-young found her at the drink station within 20 minutes and stayed for the better part of an hour. He was charming, funny, genuinely interested in her work. He made her laugh twice. He stood close and touched her forearm 3 times, and at the end of the hour asked if she wanted to continue the conversation somewhere quieter. She said warmly and clearly no and extracted herself without a second thought. She mentioned it to Jisoo the following Saturday. Casually. A passing detail of her week. The way she had started sharing small things because she liked how he received even small things. She watched his face while she talked. Nothing moved in his expression. Nothing changed in his posture. He was holding his coffee cup with both hands and looking at her, and his face was exactly as it always was, controlled, still, direct. Except for his hands. His hands around the cup had gone very still. Not the usual still. A different still. The still of something being held carefully, because without the holding it would do something else entirely. She kept talking. She watched his hands. "He sounds pleasant," Jisoo said when she finished. His voice was exactly the same. Measured. Even. "He was fine," she said. "I said no, and he was gracious about it." "Good," Jisoo said. She looked at him. She looked at his hands on the cup. "Jisoo," she said. "Yes," he said. "Are you jealous?" she said. The tips of his ears went red so fast it was almost audible. "No," he said. "Your hands," she said. He looked at his hands. He set the cup down on the table with great deliberateness. He looked at the table. He looked at her. "Slightly," he said. She looked at him. She felt something warm spread through her chest. Something that had everything to do with the fact that this man, this controlled and composed and carefully managed man, had gone red at the ears over a client she had dismissed in under a minute. "Jisoo," she said. He looked at her. "I said no to him in less than 60 seconds, she said. Without thinking about it. Without it being a decision. She held his gaze. "You understand what that means." He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "Good," she said. She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. He turned his hand over and held hers and looked at it for a long moment with an expression that was private and grateful and entirely his own. "Still," she said. "Still what?" he said. "Still jealous," she said. The corner of his mouth moved, further than usual. "Slightly," he said. She laughed and kept his hand, and the coffee shop went warm around them. The dinner in Hannam happened on a Friday evening in December, 3 months after the restaurant, 2 months after the first Saturday. He had mentioned the place once, without elaboration. Small, run by a woman called Halmoni, 40 years of cooking, no sign outside. You had to know someone. He left it in the air. She said, "Take me there sometime." He looked at her and said, "This Friday." He looked at her when she walked up. Something happened in his face. Less than a second, a flash of something unguarded and quick, immediately managed and controlled back into place. But she caught it completely. "You look," he said, and stopped. She raised her eyebrows. "Ready," he said. "You look ready." She looked at him with full knowledge that that was not the word he had started with. "So do you," she said. Halmoni greeted them at the door. A small, sharp-eyed woman in her 70s who looked at Chioma with a comprehensive assessment of someone who has spent 40 years reading people across a dinner table, and then said something rapid to Jisoo in a regional dialect that Chioma's Korean could not follow. Whatever it was made Jisoo look at the floor. "What did she say?" Chioma asked after they were seated. "She said the food will be good tonight," he said. He was studying the handwritten menu with great concentration. "That made you look at the floor," she said. "The lighting is interesting," he said. She let it go. She made a private note to ask Halmoni directly at some point. The food was extraordinary, simple and deep, the kind of cooking that carried memory in it, that made you feel you were being given something more than a meal. They ate and talked, and the conversation moved the way it always moved between them. No performance, no contest, no filling of silence for its own sake. But something was different tonight. The table was smaller than the coffee shop. The lighting was warmer and lower. There was wine, a quiet Korean white that Halmoni had chosen herself. And the combination of all of it was doing something to the careful management of the space between them, loosening it by degrees. At one point, she was telling a story about a project presentation that had gone catastrophically wrong 6 months ago, and she was laughing at her own retelling of it, and she looked up mid-sentence and found him watching her with an expression she had not seen on his face before. Warm, open, completely unguarded in a way that landed somewhere behind her sternum. She lost the thread of the sentence entirely. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "You were looking at me." "Yes," he said. "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. He looked at the wine in his glass, then back at her. "Because when you laugh like that," he said carefully, "I think about what you must have been like as a child. Whether you were always like this." "Like what?" she said. He met her eyes. "Like someone the entire room wants to watch," he said. The candlelight caught the wine. She looked at it. There was warmth in her face that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Just so," she said. "Yes," he said. "Are you telling me something?" He looked at the table, then at her, then very slowly. "I think you know what I'm telling you." She looked at him for a long time. The restaurant was quiet around them. Only 4 other tables, Halmoni moving gently in the background, rain beginning against the windows. "Say it," she said. Not a demand. Almost a question. "I'm not sure I know how," he said. "You're doing fine so far," she said. The control cracked at the edges of his expression, the way a careful surface shows the faintest line when something presses against it from the inside. "Chioma," he said. "Yes," she said. "I think about you every day," he said. "Every day since the restaurant. I think about you and I," he stopped. His jaw worked. "I am not someone who says things like this easily." "I know," she said. "I don't want to say it wrong," he said. "You're not saying it wrong," she said. He looked at her across the small candlelit table with the rain coming down outside and said quietly, "I think about you every day too. Every day. I look for you on Saturdays before I have even opened the door." His hand, flat on the table between them, moved 2 centimeters toward hers. She moved her hand to meet it. His fingers slid between hers and closed. Carefully, with the full deliberateness of someone who has thought about this moment and chosen it completely. They sat like that, hands held across the table, the rain on the windows, the candle between them, and nothing else needed to be said. Halmoni came out from the back, glanced at the table, and went back into the kitchen with a small private smile that neither of them saw. Walking back through Hanum afterward, the rain had softened to a mist that caught the streetlights in pale halos. They walked close enough that their arms brushed with each step, not holding on, just near, just maintaining the contact the restaurant had opened. She was telling him about a narrow traditional hanok she passed every day on her way to work, squeezed between 2 modern towers, how it refused to disappear. When she turned to say something and found him closer than she expected, looking at her with that same open expression from the table. She stopped talking. He reached up slowly and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear that the mist had pulled loose. His fingers rested against the side of her face. Just resting. Not pushing. His thumb at the edge of her cheekbone, and his eyes on hers with the kind of focus that makes everything else lose resolution. "Is this okay?" he said. Very quietly. "Yes," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. He leaned forward and kissed her. Soft and careful and entirely unhurried. The kiss of a person who has been thinking about something for a long time, and when they finally arrive at it, they give it their full attention. His hand was still at the side of her face. Her hand had found the front of his jacket without her deciding to put it there. When they separated, she kept her eyes closed for 1 second longer than necessary. When she opened them, he was still close, looking at her with his version of undone. Composure present, but no longer load-bearing. "I've been wanting to do that for a long time," he said. "How long?" she said. "Since the morning you told me not to do things without telling you first," he said. "You said it and I thought, this woman is going to be a problem." She laughed, full and bright and entirely unplanned, and his face broke open into a real smile. Complete. Unguarded. The kind that changed his entire face and made him look younger and lighter, as if something he had been carrying had decided on its own to put itself down. She had seen it twice before. She intended to see it many more times. "There it is," she said. The actual smile. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Hanjiso," she said. "You are smiling." "It's the mist," he said. "Something in my eyes." She laughed again, and he watched her with the full smile still in place, and she thought, "I am in serious, irreversible trouble, and I find I do not mind at all." He took her hand for the walk back to where his car waited, and she let him, and the city moved quietly around them in the December mist. She told her mother on a Sunday video call the following week. Just, there is someone. Complicated. But good. Her mother Ngozi looked at her through the screen with those eyes that had always read Chioma more accurately than Chioma read herself. "Do you feel safe with him?" her mother said. Chioma thought about his hand on her face in the Hanum mist. About the way he sat at the corner of every room with his back, not to the door. About 3 sentences in a text message late at night. "Are you home?" "Yes." "Someone is outside." "Sleep." "Yes," she said. "Does he make you earn the right to speak?" "No," Chioma said. "Does he make you feel small?" Chioma looked at the screen. "He makes me feel seen," she said. Her mother looked at her for a long moment. She nodded once, the slow, deliberate nod of a woman whose assessment was complete. "Bring him to me," she said. "Not today, but eventually." In January, the trouble with Kennedy resumed. Not the business consequences. Those had settled into their new permanent shape, and Kennedy had stopped pretending otherwise. This was something else. Something more desperate and less calculated, as if the pragmatic businessman in him had begun losing ground to the part of him that had never, in 2 years, been told no for long. He appeared outside her gym on a Wednesday morning. He was there near a restaurant where she had dinner with Minji on a Thursday evening. He called from an unknown number on a Saturday night. She did not answer, but she stood in her kitchen holding the ringing phone and felt a chill along her arms that had nothing to do with the temperature. She told Jisoo the following Saturday. He listened to all of it. His hands were flat on the table, and by the end of what she was describing they had gone very still in a way that was different from his usual stillness. The stillness of something being held down rather than something at rest. "He's watching you," Jisoo said. "I know," she said. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed a small card on the table. "A driver will be positioned near your building from tomorrow," he said. "On call. 3.5 minutes from your door. That number reaches him directly." She looked at the card, then at him. "You already arranged this." "I arranged it last week," he said. "When you first mentioned the gym." She looked at him. "I know," he said before she could speak. "I'm telling you now. That is me trying." She picked up the card. She looked at it for a moment. "Thank you," she said. "That is you trying and I see it. But Jisoo, tell me first. Even when you have already done it. Tell me first and then do it." "Yes," he said. She reached across and covered his hand. He turned his palm up beneath hers and held it and looked at it with an expression that was private and grateful in equal measure. In February, Jisoo met Kennedy in a private room in a Cheongdam hotel. 2 chairs. A low table. No other people. No record kept. Kennedy arrived with the posture of a man who had rehearsed himself into confidence. He left 40 minutes later without it. Jisoo told Chioma on Saturday what had been said. The difference between the consequences Kennedy had already experienced and the consequences that would follow any further contact with her. That the current level of inconvenience was the minimum setting, not the maximum. "Did you enjoy it?" she asked. He met her eyes. An honest pause. "A little," he said. She covered her mouth. She laughed until her shoulders shook, and he watched her with the expression that meant his composure was under significant structural pressure. "You are terrible," she said. "Somewhat," he agreed. She was still smiling when she reached across and took his hand, and he turned his palm up immediately, without hesitation, like her hand finding his was something he had been quietly waiting for all morning. They came close to falling apart in February, on a Wednesday evening at his Itaewon apartment. She had been spending more evenings there, a gradual, unannounced shift that neither of them had formally discussed, the kind of thing that happens when 2 people have stopped pretending they are not heading somewhere specific. She was on the couch with a book. He was across the room with his own when his phone rang, and he stepped into the bedroom to take it. She was not listening. Genuinely not. But the apartment was not large, and after a few minutes she heard the quality of his voice change. She heard a woman's name. "Yuna," said twice, in the tone of someone navigating something delicate. Then a long silence in which he was clearly listening. Then very quietly, "I know. Not now." "I said not now, Yuna." The call ended. He came back into the room and sat in the chair across from her. She looked at her book. She read the same line 4 times and absorbed none of it. "Who is Yuna?" she said. "Someone I knew before," he said. "Before you. And she calls you," Chioma said. "Sometimes," he said. "I don't usually answer. Tonight she reached me." "What did she want?" A pause. "To see me," he said. "And," she said. "And I said no," he said. She nodded. She turned a page she had not read. She put the book down. She stood up and picked up her bag from the chair by the door. "Chioma, I just need some air," she said. Her voice was controlled, and she hated that it was, because the control was costing her something. "Please don't go," he said. She stopped with her hand on her bag strap, and her back to him, and the apartment perfectly still around them. I'm not him, Jisoo said. His voice was very quiet. I know you know the difference. But I also know what it cost you to let yourself trust me. I know how carefully you moved before you let me in. She heard him stand, heard him cross the room, felt him stop directly behind her. There is one situation in my life. It is you. It has been you since the first Saturday. His hand came to her shoulder. One hand. Not gripping. Just there. Tell me what you need, he said. If you need to go home, I'll walk you to the car. If you need to be angry, be angry. If you need me to explain everything, I will explain everything. But please don't leave without telling me what this is. Because if you leave right now, it sits between us and becomes something it isn't. She turned around. He was closer than she expected. She looked up at his face, the composed, careful face she had learned piece by piece, that she knew now the way you know a city you have walked for years. And she saw what she had seen in the Hannah mist and on the pavement outside Orchid. No calculation. No armor. Just him, standing in front of her, waiting for whatever she needed to give him. Her eyes filled. I'm scared, she said. It came out smaller than she intended. I know, he said. I was so careful this time, she said. I went slowly. I checked everything. Her voice broke. And I still don't know if I can trust my own. You can, he said. You don't. Chioma. Both hands on her face, the hold that made the city outside disappear entirely. You can trust yourself, he said. You chose right this time. I am not going to prove you wrong. I need you to hear that. She looked at him. The tears came, the full kind, the unmanaged kind. And she let them because she was tired, genuinely tired, of holding things back for the sake of appearing composed in front of a person who had already seen her at her most exposed and had not moved an inch. He pulled her in, both arms around her, completely the way he did everything, with full intention, like the holding was the entire point. She cried into his shirt, and he said nothing, and he did not move, and he stayed. When she finished, he kept his arms around her for another long moment. She pressed her ear against his chest and felt his heartbeat, steady, a little fast, entirely real, and felt the last of something tight inside her let go completely. She stepped back. She looked at his shirt. I got it wet, she said. I have other shirts, he said. She made a sound that was half laugh and half leftover cry. She wiped her face. He reached out and wiped the remaining tears from her cheekbone with his thumb, slowly, carefully, and looked at her with such specific, undiluted tenderness that she had to look away for a second. Yuna, she said, is in the past, he said. That is everything I have to say about her. And if she keeps calling, then I will stop answering, he said. That is also everything. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she put her bag back on the chair by the door and went back to the couch. He went to the kitchen and came back with 2 cups of tea and set one beside her and sat in his chair and picked up his book, and she picked up hers. They did not talk about it again. They did not need to. In March, the Sungo photograph arrived. Chioma came home from work on a Tuesday evening to find her doorman waiting with an envelope and an expression that told her before he spoke that something was wrong. Inside was a photograph of her leaving her office building in Gangnam that morning, taken from across the street, a long-distance shot, and a note handwritten in Korean on the back. Tell Han Jisoo to remember where his edges are. She stood in the lobby of her building with the photograph in her hands and her heart beating in a way she did not like, and she called Jisoo. He answered before the second ring. Read it to me, he said when she told him what she had. She read it. 3 seconds of silence. Go upstairs, he said. Lock the door. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He arrived in 18. He came through her door and looked at her first, a quick, thorough look from head to foot. And then he crossed to the counter and picked up the photograph and looked at it, and the stillness that came over him was the coldest she had ever seen from him. Not anger. Something colder than anger. The stillness of a person calculating. Park Sungo, he said. One name. Placed like a period at the end of a sentence. Who is he? She asked. Jisoo set the photograph down. He looked at her and explained directly without softening it. Park Sungo was a mid-level figure in a competing network, one of the families the Han network had maintained a careful, managed tension with for 15 years. The tension had its rules. Those rules had held until now. Sungo wanted to renegotiate a territory arrangement and had decided that reaching Chioma was the fastest way to force Jisoo into an emotional response. An emotional response would give Sungo exactly the leverage he needed. A precise response would end the test entirely. I need you to stay somewhere else for a few days, Jisoo said. A residence I have in Mapo. Private entrance, 2 staff who have worked for my family for 20 years. You already have it prepared, she said. I had it prepared the week after the restaurant incident, he said. I should have told you that earlier. She looked at him. Yes, she said. You should have. I'm telling you now, he said. She looked at the photograph on the counter. At her own image, unsuspecting, crossing a pavement she crossed every morning. She felt the chill of it, someone's eyes on her without her knowledge, her movement tracked, her body used as a message. She looked back at Jisoo. I'm not afraid of him, she said. He looked at her. I want to be clear about that, she said. I am not going to live my life being afraid of men who see me as a problem to be managed. Something moved in his eyes, something warm underneath the cold calculation. I know, he said. But I'll stay in Mapo for a few days, she said. Because it's practical. Not because I'm frightened. He crossed the kitchen and stood in front of her and put both hands on her face and looked at her. I'm sorry, he said, that this found you. It's not your fault, she said. It came from my world, he said. And you're handling it, she said. That's what matters. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he kissed her, both hands in her hair and her hands finding the front of his jacket and neither of them pulling back. When they stopped, she pressed her forehead against his, and they both stood there with their eyes closed. Pack your bag, he said quietly. I know, she said. The Mapo apartment sat on a high floor with a private entrance and a view of the city at night that made Seoul look like a circuit board lit from inside. The Kims, the couple who staffed it, 20 years with the Han family, had the apartment ready before she arrived. Fresh flowers on the table. The kind of preparation that spoke of a household that had been waiting for this possibility. Jisoo stayed the first night. She found this out at 2 a.m. when she woke and came out to find him on the couch. Shoes off, jacket folded over the armrest, a small lamp beside him, reading with the contained stillness of a person who had been awake for some time and did not mind it. She stood in the doorway. He looked up. You should have said you were staying, she said. I didn't want to make it a discussion, he said. She looked at him for a moment. Do you want to stay? Yes, he said. Then stay, she said. On the couch. I know, he said. She went back to bed. She lay in the quiet of the apartment, steadier than the quiet of her own building, the quiet of a place where someone was keeping watch and was not going to stop, and she fell asleep faster than she expected and did not wake again until morning. Jisoo handled Sungo in 3 moves. The first was a conversation between his father Han Yong-soo and Sungo's superior in the network. 1 full generation above the incident, which communicated the gravity of what had been done without a single explicit statement of consequence. The second was the quiet withdrawal of 2 logistics contracts that Sungo's network had depended on, framed as operational review, effective immediately, removing income without removing face. The third was a private meeting between Jisoo and Sungo. 40 minutes. No location recorded. No record kept. Jisoo told Chioma 1 sentence. He understood. What exactly did he understand? She asked. That the method was unacceptable, Jisoo said, and that using it again would cost him substantially more than the territory dispute was worth. He also understood that the arrangement he wanted to renegotiate is now on a longer timeline and will move entirely on our terms. She looked at him steadily. You turned his pressure into your advantage. He gave me the reason to reset the table, Jisoo said. I used it. She studied him. The controlled, precise way he moved through situations that would have unraveled most people. The lines he held. The rules he had built for himself inside a world that had not been built with rules. She reached across and placed her hand over his. He turned his palm up and held her hand and said nothing, and the weight of what she understood about him settled quietly into its permanent place. In March, 3 weeks after Busan, in the early morning at the harbor, the fishing boats coming in, the light turning from gray to gold, he had held her face in his hands and said, I love you for the first time. She had said it back and meant it in every direction. Backward through all the Saturdays and the Hannah mist, and the February night she had almost walked out, and forward through everything she could not yet see but had decided to walk toward anyway. He had smiled, the full smile, and she had thought, I will spend a great deal of my life making this happen. In April, the Taeyong photograph arrived. Not Sungo this time. Someone else. Someone from inside. The same format. A photograph of her leaving her office, a handwritten note on the back. This one in Korean. The Han name is not for foreign decoration. Jisoo looked at it and said 1 word. Taeyong. His cousin. Younger, reckless, ambitious in the way of someone who had not yet been seriously tested. He had been making noise within the family for months. In the corridors of Han family meetings, in the ears of relatives who reported back with the careful loyalty of people who understood how information moved. Jisoo had assessed it as manageable. He had been wrong about that. He had someone watch me, Chioma said. Yes, Jisoo said. She looked at the photograph on her kitchen counter. At her own image, unsuspecting on a morning pavement, used as a message by a man who had never spoken a word to her. She looked back at Jisoo. At the contained anger moving beneath his composure like something under ice. Fix it, she said. He looked at her. Completely, she said. This time, fix it completely. He stayed that night. On the couch, the way it had always been in these arrangements. She woke at 2 a.m. and found him there, small lamp, open book, the quiet of a person keeping watch. She came and sat on the other end of the couch and pulled a blanket over herself. He looked at her. Come here, she said. He moved along the couch and she leaned into his side and he put his arm around her and she felt his breathing slow, gradually, and then slow again, and then settle into the long, steady rhythm of sleep. She stayed awake a little longer. She looked at his face, completely unguarded in sleep. All the careful management released, just a person at rest, and she thought, I would fight for this. Whatever it costs. I would fight for this. She closed her eyes. The meeting between Jisoo and Taeyong lasted 55 minutes in a room at the Cheongdam office. No one else present. No record kept. Taeyong arrived with confidence. He left without it. In the weeks that followed, the sideways comments within the family stopped. The surveillance stopped. Taeyong began the careful, humble process of minding his own affairs. Jisoo told Chioma on Saturday. It's handled. Permanently, she said. Permanently, he said. What did you say to him? Jisoo looked at the table for a moment. I told him that what he was doing would cost him more than he had calculated. I told him that if he frightened you again, in any way, through any method, there would be nothing left for him in this city. He paused. And I told him that I was going to marry you, and that he needed to decide now what side of that he wanted to be on. Chioma stopped. She looked at him. He was looking at the table. Jisoo, she said. He looked up. You told him you were going to marry me, she said. Yes, he said. Before asking me, she said. Yes, he said. She looked at him. He looked back at her with the expression of a man who understands he has made an error and is not going to compound it by defending himself. That is exactly the kind of thing you are supposed to tell me first, she said. I know, he said. Hanjiso. I know, he said. I'm sorry. She looked at him for a long, full moment. Is it true? She said. He looked at her without blinking. Yes, he said. It's true. She looked at the table. She looked at her hands. She looked at him. Then we will talk about it, she said. Properly. When you are ready to do it correctly. Yes, he said. And next time you tell someone you are going to marry me, she said, tell me first. Yes, he said. The tips of his ears were completely, thoroughly red. She noted this for the permanent record and said nothing. In May, he did it correctly. She was in the coffee shop on a Saturday morning. Sketchbook open, coffee in hand, arguing good-naturedly with the owner's wife about a song on the small speaker behind the counter. She did not hear him arrive. She felt the shift in the air when he sat down. She looked up. He put a small box on the table between their cups. She looked at it. She looked at him. He was looking at her with that expression she had learned over 7 months. Warm, direct, entirely undefended. The one that was simply love in the particular language of a man who had limited words for it and had decided to spend his life showing it instead. Chioma, he said. Yes, she said. Will you marry me? He said. She looked at the box. She looked at him. She looked around the small warm room in Itaewon where they had begun, where Saturday mornings had become the fixed point of her week, where he had first told her she had made herself taller, where his ears had gone pink over nothing, and she had filed it away with such care. She reached across the table and opened the box herself. The ring was simple and exactly right, chosen for her specifically, with complete knowledge of who she was. Yes, she said. He took the ring from the box and placed it on her finger with both hands. She looked at it on her hand and felt her eyes fill. Not the held-back tears of a restaurant in Cheongdam a lifetime ago, but the full, unashamed tears of a woman receiving something she had not known she was waiting for. Hey, he said. She looked up. His brow was slightly furrowed, the look he had when he was concerned and did not know what to do about it. Good tears, she said. Not bad ones. The furrow eased. Are you sure? He said. Just so. She took his face in both hands the way she had been doing since the Hannam Street. I have never been more sure of anything. He turned his head and pressed his lips against her palm. Her breath caught. The owner's wife looked across the coffee shop, saw the ring, looked at her husband behind the counter, and said something in rapid Korean that made him lean out from behind the machine and pump his fist once in unmistakable celebration. Jisoo looked at them. He looked at Chioma. They've been expecting this, he said. Since when? She said. Since the second Saturday, he said. You told them? Halmoni told them, he said. She stopped. What exactly did Halmoni say to you that first dinner that made you look at the floor? He was quiet for a moment. Then, she said it took me long enough, and that if I did not ask you by summer, she would ask you herself and move you into the restaurant. Chioma covered her mouth. She laughed until her shoulders shook, and he watched her with his full smile. The real one, the complete one, the one that still changed his entire face every single time. And she thought, there it is. There it always is. She leaned across the table and kissed him in the middle of the coffee shop while the owner's wife clapped behind them. In August, her parents came to Seoul. Her mother Ngozi had taken one look at Jisoo standing in the garden of the Hanam restaurant, talking to the florist with his usual focused, unhurried attention, and had found Chioma and said quietly, "This one." Just those 2 words. In the tone that meant the matter was settled. Her father Emeka had shaken Jisoo's hand at dinner and looked at him the way he looked at everything, for its underlying structure, and then said, "You chose good space," gesturing at the restaurant around them. Jisoo had looked at him and said, "I had help understanding what good space means." And Emeka had looked across the table at Chioma and nodded once. The nod of a man who has examined a structure and found it sound. After dinner, while Ngozi talked with Chioma a few feet away, Emeka stood beside Jisoo and looked at the Gangnam skyline. "My daughter carries things alone," he said. "She always has." He paused. "Don't let her." "I know," Jisoo said. Emeka looked at him. He nodded once more. They stood together until Ngozi called them over, and the evening closed warmly around all of them. They were married on a Saturday in October, exactly 1 year after the night in the restaurant where it had begun. The ceremony was in a private garden in Hanam. The ginkgo trees had turned yellow. The light was low and gold and unhurried. 30 people. Everyone who mattered. Halmoni sat in the front row in a lilac hanbok and cried openly from the beginning and told anyone who looked at her that it was entirely her right. Minji stood beside Chioma through the whole morning, handed her tissues at 2 separate moments, and at one point held both her hands and said, "I take full credit for this," which Chioma allowed because the sentiment was genuine even if the claim was not. Jisoo's father attended. At the reception he found Chioma and said in careful English, "You are good for him. He is different with you." He paused. "Do not let him forget that different is not the same as weak." She met his eyes. "He could never forget that," she said. "He is the least weak person I have ever known." Han Yong-soo looked at her for a long moment and then nodded once. The same nod, the same deliberateness, entirely Jisoo, and returned to his table. Jisoo's brother had flown in from Jeju that morning, windswept and deeply pleased with himself, and spent the ceremony beside Jisoo with the expression of a man taking personal credit for something he had done absolutely nothing to bring about. Taeyong sent a formal gift. He did not attend. The chair that might have been his was given to one of Halmoni's granddaughters instead. Chioma walked through the garden in a dress the color of deep burgundy, full length, structured at the shoulders, entirely herself. She had looked at white and ivory and cream and said no. Minji had cried when she first saw it. Her mother had said simply, "Yes, that is you." Jisoo stood at the end of the garden path. He watched her walk toward him, and his face did the thing it had done only a handful of times across the entire course of knowing her. That complete, unguarded opening, every layer of control set aside, leaving only the man underneath who loved her with every careful, deliberate, thoroughly considered part of himself. She reached him. She took his hands. "You're crying," she said. He was. Very quietly. A single line at the corner of his right eye that he had not moved to conceal. "Something in the air," he said. "The ginkgo trees," she agreed. He squeezed her hands, and she squeezed back, and the officiant began, and the garden held them, and the October light held everything, and they made their promises in Korean and in English because one was the language of the city that held their story and the other was hers, and both of them now belonged entirely to the life they were choosing. 3 years later, on a Saturday morning in April, Chioma sat in the coffee shop in Itaewon. The same table by the window. The owner's wife had set it up with the extra cushion on the chair across from her without being asked, because she had been a regular long enough that it was simply understood. Sketchbook open. Coffee beside it. Across from her, a small boy of 2.5 sat on the cushioned chair eating a piece of pastry with the concentrated seriousness of someone who considered this a task that deserved full attention. He distributed crumbs across the table with cheerful indifference. He looked up at Chioma periodically with eyes that were entirely his father's, steady, direct, attending to everything around him with quiet thoroughness. His name was Tabena. Her choice. When she had suggested it, Jisoo had said, "Tell me what it means." She had said, "One who goes before. One who leads the way." He had been quiet for a long time. Then he had said, yes, and that had been the entire conversation. No more was needed. Tabena set the last piece of pastry down carefully. He looked at the door. Appa, he said. He's coming, Chioma said. The door opened. Hanjisu walked into the coffee shop the way he had walked into it for years. Unhurried, coat off at the door, eyes moving across the room looking for his people. When he found them, something in his face settled into that particular quality she had spent years learning to read. The expression of a man who has arrived at the place that makes the rest of the week make sense. He crossed the room. He sat down. He looked at Tabena, who pointed at the table with the gravity of a prosecutor presenting evidence. Crumbs, Tabena said. I see them, Jisu said. I ate it, Tabena said. I can see that too, Jisu said. He lifted his son from the chair and settled him against his chest. Tabena leaned back with the complete, boneless confidence of a child who has never once in his short life doubted that the arms holding him will continue to hold. Jisu looked at Chioma over the top of their son's head. She was looking at her sketchbook. She felt his eyes and looked up. Good morning, he said. Good morning, she said. He reached across the table, past the coffee cups, past the crumbs, past the open sketchbook, and placed his hand over hers. Just that. His fingers over hers, briefly. The way you touch something you are glad is still there. She turned her hand over and held his. Thank you. Thank you for being here for this story. Now I need to hear from you in the comments. Which scene stayed with you the longest? And the question everyone needs to answer. Did Hanjisu go too far? He dismantled a man's career and standing in this city without raising his voice once, without a single move traced back to him publicly. Was that justice? Or was that a dangerous man doing what dangerous men do and calling it love? You decide. If this story reached you, please like it, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe so you are here for everything that comes next. Drop your location in the comments. I want to know where in the world you are watching from. I will see you in the next one.